And finally, we're going to look at one more aspect of the CISG, okay, and it's called risk, this thing called risk. When does risk transfer? So what is transfer of risk? It's basically the moment at which the seller's obligations, the ones we looked at, okay, so for example, to deliver the goods, actually become the buyer's obligations to pay. So at what point does the seller, when he delivers the goods, does the buyer then have to receive the goods or pay the price? At what point, and this becomes a fundamental issue in court cases and disputes, okay, at one point did the seller fulfill his obligation, and at what point did the buyer fail to fulfill his obligation? And under the CISG, for contracts of carriage, that's when there's delivery of goods. Risk will be transferred from the seller to the buyer as soon as the goods are handed over to the first carrier. Essentially, it would be a scenario like this. So say, for example, that is the seller. As soon as she hands over the goods to the carrier, who is going to then ship them over to the buyer, that's when risk is transferred. That's when the buyer is under the obligation to pay and take delivery. Before this moment, it would be the seller's obligation to make delivery and make sure the goods are conforming. And then the goods are put onto a cargo ship and then they arrive at the buyer's house. So that would be the basis of risk transfer. It's a little bit complicated, so you might have to watch this bit again, but it becomes a very, very fundamental issue, especially when there's a dispute.